One of the things that surprised me the most learning about the Gulf of Mexico is the amount of springs and sinkholes, just kind of crazy, holes that you'll see spots drop off 15, 20 feet, deep in the Gulf of Mexico. This is a spring, goes from about 155 to 175, 170 feet. And it was found by a guy, and we went out to it, and I said, I got to drop my GoPro on this. So here's the GoPro going down. And this spot's got some mystery to it. So you can see some barracudas at the top. They like to sit over that, wreck springs, some real big bottom offshore. So GoPro's going down. And this is after I'd caught a special fish, which you'll see here in a second, I believe. First one I've ever caught in my life, actually. So if you look in the distance, you can see kind of almost looks like a wall. And I think what that is I'll explain in a minute, but it's kind of like a ledge, real big, tall ledge that goes down like 15 feet. So you can see that darkness. So there's definitely something over there. So it's going down, real dark spot. So GoPro's getting low. There's the wall kind of back there. And you see some mangrove snapper. And then there's this interesting piece of structure right here. Big fish, cool little reef fish. And if you notice, a lot of people don't think you can see color down that deep. Even though this is 160, 165 feet deep, you get a lot of blue and yellow coming off that reef fish. And also yellowtail snapper. And so then there's this piece of structure, which looks awfully man-made. It comes to a point. Looks almost like a boat, and there's a big fish right there. Can't quite tell what that one is. The guy said he's caught quite a few muttons out here. So, it could be some mutton, could be some black grouper on this spot. Wouldn't doubt it. So this structure here, something very interesting. Man-made, almost looks like a rope right there. And he didn't know what it was, the guy that kind of found the spot. So I was curious, and I put, a little quick video up on Facebook showing what you're seeing right now with this spot, saying, does anybody know what this is? Or wondering kind of, what we're seeing here. But anyway, on the spot itself, so you got your structure. It's in the middle of a spring. The spring itself is good relief. So obviously it's going to hold some fish. So you got some yellowtail snapper, a bunch of jacks, some reef fish, just all kinds of good stuff in a deep spring. The bite wasn't real good. We didn't really get much while we were there. I think it was kind of early afternoon. Springs and wrecks offshore, typically your best bite's going to be first thing in the morning and last thing at night when you get those low light situations, and these kind of fish will rise up in the water column. So GoPro's just kind of drifting around as we're coming out of the spring. See some darker sand, so it's probably some hard bottom. Just fish kind of scattered throughout. And a snapper kind of swimming with the camera. And I wasn't actually reeling the camera in. You can see it's now starting to hit bottom. So this is when we're coming off the back end of the spring. So here's some more rocks. And what I meant is, so I didn't reel it up at all. So now that I'm hitting bottom, obviously you can tell it's getting a little shallower. And so there's some amberjack. You got AJs. You can see a little bit of yellowtail, mangrove snapper. And there's some bigger rocks over there. So it's quite a bit of structure. There's some schools of bait. And even I learn stuff every time I watch this because there's so much going on, so many different types of fish on these spots. So now the camera is officially on the bottom. I typically crank it up like 5 or so feet. So from where that structure was sitting on the bottom to the side of it over here, it's obviously a little bit shallower. So we didn't quite get a good shot of the rocks and the edge over there. So now camera's literally dragging. So I kind of felt it. I could see the rod bouncing up and down, so I cranked it up a few cranks just to get it off the bottom. I didn't know what was down there, so I didn't want to get it hung up in anything. I mean, if you drag the camera into the side of a wreck or the side of a ledge or something, there's a good chance you might not be getting it back. So I try to be a little careful. So you can see lots of snapper. There's the rocks over there. We tried to get on the edge to get a good shot. So as the camera's coming up, you can see there's that thing again. I try to get a pause on it. Don't really know what it is. I'm sure if it was cleaner, you could see it a little bit better of an outline. Wanted to get one more shot. He said, hey, drop it again. Just ran over a little bit of hard bottom, which you can see there. Big old Goliath. Doesn't matter how deep you are in the Gulf, they seem to live out to about 250 feet on all these bottoms. So camera's coming up. Decent sized amberjack right there. Another amberjack, and then this fish. Something that was always a mystery to me, but I finally got one. I got one on this spot. African pompano. So African pompano, it fought kind of like the inshore version of a pompano. If you've ever hooked one inshore, they're pretty crazy. They'll bite your hook and then kind of run back towards you. And that's what this one did. I got on a frozen sardine with about a 6-ounce weight on a pretty heavy rod. I think it was about 22 pounds. And so when I hooked it, it immediately took off for the surface, and it was pretty crazy. And you look down, and you could see just how shiny it was. It stood out quite a bit. And I've heard stories from people when the water's real clean and real calm. If they get shallow enough, you'll see them below the boat because they reflect so much. They're so shiny. So very cool. So African pompano out on this deep spring, something to think about if you're out there. Very tasty, very firm fish. Good to eat, almost like a whiter version of a cobia. So camera's just coming up here. You can see a few fish. Almost looks like a shark back there. Also wouldn't be surprised. These springs that tend to be a little more fished have sharks. So coming back to this mystery structure. So I put this on Facebook, and I said, does anybody have an idea of what this might be? And I got a reply from somebody on that post, and the guy's like, yeah, it's this captain's boat. I said, what? And he said, oh, it's a captain's boat. He sank when he was out fishing the spring. So I messaged him, and I censored just in case, nobody wants any information getting out there. I messaged him, said, hey, have you actually dove and recognized that spot? And he goes, was it close to the spring? I said, yes, very, as you could see from dropping the GoPro down. He said, that's my red snapper honey hole. Okay, well, maybe this guy's got the spot. How does he know? So I give him the depth, and he said it's not well known, and he said he almost died with a carbo. So now I'm realizing, hey, he's a diver. And, I'm at this point, I'm pretty amazed. I'm like, wow, this guy actually knows what this spot is, and he's been down there and recognized it based on this other captain saying he sank. And so, after talking to a bunch of people, my wife looking at it thought it was a wreck. I didn't really know. And so I asked, who the guy was, and he says a captain, and that's a 30-foot center console. And then continuing on, he was asking me about the fish, and as you guys just saw, there's some snapper on there. The African pompano, but didn't really look like a ton of fish. And he says wild in that upflow. So I'm guessing the upflow is coming back to the beginning, is more related to this wall here. That's probably where the majority of the fish are. If you got a big old vertical wall that drops 15 feet, obviously it's going to have more life on it. And it says there isn't anything else around it. And no red snapper, which you saw in the video. We didn't see any there. Didn't catch any there. And obviously, if he knows the spot, he probably knows people fishing it. So charter guys out there. And the spot, we found a spot earlier that was pretty close to where we got a bunch of red snapper. So then I started asking, is the boat sunk there on purpose? Since it was close to the spring, he said they're fishing and they sank in the middle of the winter, went down in 7 minutes, and they got picked up by a commercial boat. And so me being interested, I want to do a story on this, and for the outdoors writing that I do. And he says no, he's embarrassed. 5 or 6 years. I'm like, well, maybe I could talk to him about it. And I said, it looks like it has been down there a little bit longer than 5 or 6 years, based on the amount of barnacles and everything on it. I would think a boat that's only been down 5 or 6 years would be cleaner than that. But at this point, I was fully believing him. So he says they were fishing this spring, and I said 50 miles west of where we were out of. And so I'd say, hey, the guy that found it 10 years ago, he hadn't been back since, and we were just kind of checking these spots out. And so I want to know, does this captain still fish? And he gave me the name, his full name. And so I went and looked him up on Facebook. And here's the brief conversation that ensued. Obviously, I'm all in at this point. I'm believing the story. So I say, hi, is this who I think it is? And I tell him I write outdoors articles and what happened. And I drop my GoPro down to the spring. Saw a boat. This guy says it's yours. I want to know more. I also don't want to, bring up something that's probably got some bad memories associated with it. And he says he has a boat out there, but it's in 120 feet. So is it not his boat? Is it his boat? I'm guessing with his reply that I'm not going to find out. So I ask, what I'm seeing on my video. Is this something different than your boat? And he goes, yes. So I didn't really want to push the subject, especially if, it's true that he sank out in 155 feet. That's probably not something you want a lot of people to know about. So I didn't really want to push the issue. Could it be true? Maybe. Maybe not. So what is this? I don't think it's a center console that was sank 5 or 6 years ago, just by the amount of growth and the look of it. It looks more like it's got a point. So like a commercial boat would be, if you look in the Northeast, the tuna boats, it's got kind of that steep bow if it is a ship, but or a boat, it doesn't really have that flare to it. So maybe a shipping container or something sank out there. But it is highly possible that somebody was fishing this spring and went down, because, accidents do happen, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, where conditions can turn pretty crazy pretty quick. So it's one of those things that we might just never know. There's a lot of mysteries and hidden aspects to the Gulf, and that's one of the reasons it's so fun to explore and get out on these spots. But what I do know is the spring obviously holds a lot of fish. It's not as much of a secret as he would like to think, the guy that found it 10 years ago, when he said he never had seen anybody else out there. Now with so many people getting so deep, a lot of these spots are becoming a little more well known, especially when it's something that is as extreme as a 15-foot drop in the Gulf of Mexico. If you're paying attention, you're going to see something like that. But it's still pretty cool. It's a cool story. Something to keep an eye on yourself if you're out there exploring out in the deep. You never really know what's down on the bottom. And here's one very, extreme example of that. And so if anybody does know what this is, feel free to hit me up. Let me know. I'm always curious to know stories behind spots. So if you, hopefully you guys got some interesting information, a little perspective on a spot out there in the deep. Feel free to subscribe to me on YouTube, like me on Facebook. Looking to share some more stories like this stuff in the future. I love getting out there, dropping the GoPro down, and seeing what kind of mysteries lie in the Gulf of Mexico. So thanks again. Enjoy.